Kelly, you can go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday, September 2nd, Caucus at Albany Common Council. For the record, council members Anane with a smiling face, Johnson, Hoey, Vallerin, Fahey, O'Brien, Conti, Love. Did I get Flynn already? Also Doche are currently present along with our staff, Michelle Andre, Danielle Gillespie, and J.R. Pichardo. We also have Corp Counsel Brett Williams here. And Mr. Robinson is also present currently. So we'll get started. We also have guests, Deputy Chief Edward Donahue and Leah Golby from Albany Police Department here with us also. We'll go through the agenda first, get through that. Then we'll hear from the good folks, their presentation, and then we'll discuss the Skyway. The Skyway comes up earlier as Resolution 77, but we're just gonna kind of just set a placeholder, move on, get through the rest, and we'll go back to it. So first on the agenda would be the public hearing. That would be for ordinance 1061-20. That's Ms. Love's. Then moving down to approval of minutes from previous meeting. I'll have the meeting minutes from our August 17th meeting. I'll be offering those for approval and to be moved. Okay, moving on to consideration of ordinances. We'll have ordinance 1791-20R by council members Hoey and O'Brien. And that will be going to the planning committee. They'll be referred to planning.
Richard's hands up.
Okay, Mr. Conti.
Thanks. Not on the substance of either this one or the next one regarding Hoffman Park, but something I've been noticing in terms of the titles of the ordinances or resolutions. Under our rule, they're supposed to include, in the title, they're supposed to include an indication of what the topic is. This is, what is it? Every title shall briefly state the subject thereof, and we haven't been these two are indications. For example, the one on 1791-20 just indicates what sections are being amended, does not indicate what the subject is. Same thing with the next one related to Hoffman Park. And the reason we put the topic in the title for transparency, so that when the public looks at the agenda, they know what the ordinance or resolution is doing without the need to having to look at that. And so we really need to get back to that. Same issue with the ordinance related to the 76 project. In neither the ordinance or the seeker resolution, the title doesn't indicate what the topic is. So we really need to get back to that for transparency's sake. Our former colleague, Mark Robinson, was very big on this, so hopefully we can get back to updating our titles so that they reflect the topics. Just an observation.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Mr. Pichardo and Mr. Williams, you guys make a note of that and remember to go back to the the old naming convention and include that information in the titles, please.
Duly noted.
And Mr. Williams as well.
I did say Mr. Williams.
You got me.
Danielle, be ready for long titles.
Okay. And yeah, it would help me also, because when I try to read through this stuff, I try to give members that haven't seen it a quick idea of what it is. So it's helpful with that. So thank you, Richard, for that. So ordinance 179120 is going to plan. It's going to be referred to planning. Okay. Next ordinance by Ms. Frederick. Ordinance.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I ask another question about that? The 179120. Is that going to have to go through a public hearing or not? Since the planning board waived, is not doing a public hearing on this again because they've already discussed the topic and this is a continuation of that discussion.
That's what Brett told us at the various meetings we went to. This is the one regarding waivers, which replaces
Right.
the ordinance that the mayor vetoed.
Correct.
And I believe Brett told us it does not have to go back to the
Okay.
planning board because
No, I mean, I know that, but does the council have to hold a public hearing on this?
that's a good question. I'm
We
not
can check.
Yeah, and for the record, Councilmember O'Brien, I think that was Amy who made those specific statements.
okay.
In any event, Richard, I will check on that and get back to everyone.
Okay, I think an argument can be made that it does not require a public hearing so that it can be, we can expedite it, but
Move it.
Yes.
Okay. So back to 18, ordinance 189120 by Ms. Frederick. That'll be a referral to Parks and Rec. Ms. Farrell, do you want to, excuse me, Ms. Frederick, did you want to say something real quick about that?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. So this is in relation to Hoffman Park Foley Field in First Ward. It came to my attention that it is a year-round dog park. And the issue with this is that our Pop Warner Youth Football League plays on the dog park during the months of August through November. So clearly that is definitely a sanitation issue, something we shouldn't have our kids have to play in. So this ordinance would make it so during the months of their season, it is no longer a dog park, so our kids get the treatment they deserve here.
Thank you. Okay, don't see any hands. Next on to ordinances held. Ms. Love's ordinance, which is the subject of the hearing, 106120, that will be a pass pending the outcome of the public hearing for that, okay? Next on to consideration of resolutions. We'll have Councilmember Fahey on behalf of Planning Committee, Resolution 769120R. It's a resolution of the Common Council reappointing Daniel Perk Davidoff as a member of Sustainability Committee. Michelle, can you just make arrangements to have him pop in and talk to? Because Kathy, would you rather have him go to the committee, or would it be suffice for him to talk to us at a caucus? That's what we did with the last.
Yeah, I think that's fine for him to come to caucus. He hasn't been on the board for that long, so he's already gone through the interview process
Okay.
in the last, I guess, couple of years.
I'll ask him to come for the September 16th, 5:30 caucus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, next on to resolution. This will be by Finance or Ms. Farrell, 779120R. This is the subject of the Skyway. So we'll we'll stick a pin in that and come back to it. But the intention was to go to finance. The administration and the mayor's office would like to see it move forward. I believe it's time sensitive, so we can discuss that. Just hold that thought, okay? So next, moving on to resolution 7891 20R by,
Kelly,
yes,
I didn't hear the end of what you said. Your voice keeps on dropping a bit, or the
Okay,
volume's
so-
not up, or
I said put a pin in 77. We're gonna come back to it and have that discussion at the end. It's a part of the Skyway discussion and that agreement that Mr. Gallen sent to us last week.
right? And so just to be clear, that's not on our active agenda.
It's, yeah, you know what? It's not showing on the active calendar. There's a desire on their behalf to move it forward, but we have to discuss it, and we'll see what comes of the discussion. Does that make sense? That I can't hear you.
You're mute.
That works. We'll come back.
It
to
does. It doesn't really make sense to me when we get 200 pages of documents and not to be noticed that it may actually be coming up for a vote. So I think the assumption is if it's not, I thought the whole purpose
Right.
of an active calendar is to put us on notice as to whether or not we need to come prepared anticipating it's going to committee or going prepared anticipating it's going for a vote.
I agree with you, Judy. We had discussions. We talked about this in leadership, and it kind of came. We talked about it, but the actual documents came late, and so I'm figuring that's how it didn't end up on the active calendar. But we'll come back to that in our discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So resolution 789120R by Ms. Ballard and Ms. Frederick. You two, either of the sponsors want to comment on the resolution? It's going to be a pass. So would you like to speak?
So this resolution, go ahead, Alfredo.
You can go. I'm driving, so it's better if you go.
Okay, so this resolution is a way to officially honor Hispanic Heritage Month in the city of Albany. We have a large Hispanic population here, and we want to show that we are, send this message out that we honor them, we represent them, and we're here to support them. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to that'll be a pass. All members want to be co-sponsors. So can we include everyone? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, all co-sponsors. Okay, next by Councilmember Farrell, resolution honoring, congratulating St. Rose on their 100th year. You wanna, or it's gonna be a pass. So all members sponsors? Yes? No? Okay. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, unless you want to say something, Jenny. No?
No, we're fortunate to have St. Rose in our city and in my ward and in Councilman Nanane's ward for 100 years now. So hopefully it will be way longer. We appreciate a lot all that they do.
I just want to notice that St. Rose is also in my ward.
It is. That's right. It
Right,
is.
yes, the
Probably the best
the art.
part, the art.
Yeah.
So,
So do you have
I would
three?
like to add something about St. Rose, if I could.
Sure. Go ahead.
Mr.
St.
Johnson, yeah.
St. Rose is the holder of that field. When the field was fields of Whitehall was transferred over to St. Rose, there was a lot of handshake agreements concerning Albany Pop Warner football that St. Rose isn't holding up to. So, I've reached out to the president of the college as well as the athletic director and haven't gotten a return call. But I think that advocation should be for that football program that was there way before the transfer of ownership, and it was transferred with the ideal that football league wouldn't lose any of its perks that they had. And from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of inconsistencies over there. So we would appreciate
So-
if someone could.
What I would love is if we could focus on the celebration of the 100 years. If that sounds like an important thing as well, but is kind of a different issue than this resolution.
Well, I'm just pointing out that we are celebrating, institutions that are, not always supporting our city, and that's important as well.
I think I don't disagree with that, but I think if you could say the same thing about every little resolution that we do. So right now, I'd like to focus on 100 years of St. Rose and appreciate them. But that is certainly important, and we can look at that as well, but it's a separate issue.
Okay.
Oh, also, Derek, I will set up a meeting between the government affairs person and yourself, so you could share your sentiment with them. Stay tuned.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, all show of hands for co-sponsors.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Johnson, would you like to be listed as a co-sponsor or no?
You're mute.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay. All right. So
Thank you.
thank you. I think it's everyone except for Mr. Johnson. Okay. Next resolution, 8091-20R by Mr. Nani, which you want to speak to this? It's going to be up for passage at our meeting, Mr. Nani.
Yeah, it's self-explanatory. Just calling the Congress to provide national funding for the cure of violence. Like many urban cities, we have seen an uptick in violence that is not unique to the city of Albany. And one of the things that, when you take in consideration to how many cuts are being made as relates to, funding for gun violence programs, has been dwindling down over the past couple of years with this administration. So we want to send a message to Congress to fund these programs. The Cure Violence program, interrupt gang violence, something that we actually have in the city of Albany. We also interrupt several other retaliations, those type of programs. And I know that SNUG is doing all that they can, and we want to make sure that they have the funding to do the work that they're established to do. Thank you.
Okay. All sponsors, all co-sponsors, correct? Yes? Okay. We'll all be listed as co-sponsors. Okay, on to the next. It's my resolution, 8191-20R, and it's a resolution approving other monitors or the investigators for the Community Police Review Board. I'd like to offer it for passage. The list came to us from the Community Police Review Board, so they reviewed them and have gone through this. We would have gotten this sooner, but there was an issue or some questions around residency. And I think we're in agreement that this is, the monitors, investigators have a special skill set, so we don't necessarily have to have all, and we're not gonna find the best investigators only here in the city of Albany. So we'll be offering that for passage at our Thursday meeting. Any questions, comments? No? Okay, all right. Next, on to resolutions held. Item number 11, which was mine, 7582-20R, the one for adopting the retention schedule. That will be offered for passage. Mr. O'Shea offered some amendments in our discussions, and those changes were made and added to the legislation, and so we're going to move forward with voting on it. Did you want to say anything, Judy?
I just want to thank staff for working with me to address my concerns about the schedule not necessarily reflecting all of our minimum retention schedules in our code, and the amendment simply recognizes that and takes care of that.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Okay, so that's the end of the agenda. So we're flipping back now to
Kelly, Michael Bryan has his hand up.
okay, Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah, just going back to the investigators, to the Citizen Police Review Board. Right now, our funding, everything is paid to the law school, right? And we don't separately fund any of these other functions, but is this are these new positions that the law school hadn't been funding, or?
No.
Oh, this is simply filling old positions then?
I believe so.
This is part of the original. Every now and then you need to replenish the pool because people might move on or something.
Oh,
But
okay.
this is nothing new. It's been a while since we've approved them, but they are
Okay.
vetted by the law school and the CPRB, and then they're sent to us for confirmation.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and Kelly, don't forget, before we move on to the next topic, we have the MC.
I wrote it down in a second.
That's just the one extending the Board of Contract and Supplies ability to waive the bidding requirements on COVID-related purchases during the states of emergency. And it had been extended, or the original deadline was actually Monday by which the original ordinance expired, August 31st. So this one would extend it out to December 31st, 2020, or until the mayor or governor's executive order emergency declarations are rescinded, whichever comes first. Councilmember Conti, I think you had a question. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you on that, about the I guess the format of.
Yeah, it was just a question as to why instead of a brand new ordinance with basically the same language, why not amend the prior ordinance we adopted by just updating the expiration date?
I guess since that ordinance had expired or will have expired by the time we get around to this ordinance, and according to legislative equivalency, I think we would have to make any amendment by ordinance anyway, and by virtue of the fact that the original ordinance and this one both go into the unconsolidated code, it seemed cleaner to do it the way we did it. But if there's a good reason to do it,
that's fine.
either way.
I just do mine based on legislative practice versus sometimes we do something different. But we would amend up on the Hill unconsolidated law if we had to. Makes no difference. This would be, by the way, an MC under ordinances versus resolutions.
Yeah, this would be an MC under ordinances, not resolutions. We simply just forgot to bring it up earlier. But because it's also being introduced on the same day per my email, I just wanted everybody to know we need unanimous consent to pass on the same day it's introduced.
All right.
And apart from the date, I think the language is exactly the same as it was for the first ordinance.
It's literally exactly the same. It's just the sunset date.
Okay, that's it's going to be 1991-20.
MCUC, if the will of the council is to pass it that same night.
Okay. Any questions, comments beyond what was stated already? Okay, so the intention is to offer for passage. Okay, so now going Well, the thing is, we have the Skyway issue that's tied to Resolution 77. But we also have the folks here for the GIF presentation that we had on the agenda prior to this. So what I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to get through the agenda first. So my apologies to the folks from APD. This might take a minute, but it's important. So along with that, or with that being said, back to Resolution 77, 9120 R, and
Did you get my?
Did someone say something? No? Okay. So with that being said, Mr. Gallen, the floor is yours for the presentation for the agreement. We can't hear you.
Rookie mistake. Thank you for making the time for us to be here. I just want to stress, so when we originally raised this last week, and part of the presentation gets into where we are today, which is just a short SparkNotes version that New York State, we went back and forth with them all summer on the terms of the agreement. We were finally comfortable with the terms that were being proposed by New York State late last week. And we knew that a council agenda was going out. So that's why we put this on the council, put this as part of the introduced legislation. But with the understanding that because New York State already put out the RFP for this project, while we haven't provided the match yet, we would need to, when we sign the agreement for the maintenance and operation of the Skyway. Now, right now, obviously your next meeting is September 10th. Our hope was to have this emceed and passed on September 10th due to the urgency of getting this signed and getting the contract signed with whoever the state secures, so that way we don't miss an entire what's left of this construction season. If we delay, we are jeopardizing losing this fall, and will very likely push back the opening. Right now, we're looking at very late 2021 as it is. We'd be looking into 2022 if we push it back. But I've heard the concern from Councilmember Doche about the agreement. I mean, I just want to stress this is essentially what we talked about back in December, where we, as part of the bonding for the Skyway, we agreed that with the council's approval of the bonding ordinance, that we would have the council review and sign off on the M&O agreement before executing the agreement itself. This doesn't change the amount of money. This doesn't change the project in any way. Basically, this agreement and the presentation we wanted to go through this evening would really show you what we were proposing to agree to in terms of maintenance and what the state's going to agree to in terms of maintenance. But I at the outset, before we even go into this, I kind of want to get a sense of, I mean, if there's overwhelming an overwhelming lack of support for passing this on September 10th, then we could ask to have it referred to the Finance Committee as soon as possible, with the hope that it could be taken up at the September 21st meeting. I don't want to have everyone, I don't want to waste your time by going through this if there's a sense that this would not be passed on September 10th.
Judy, you want to?
So I'm struggling a little bit with trying to get through these documents and, juggling a lot of other stuff. I wound up realizing late this afternoon that one of the documents I printed goes off the page. So apparently I need to, print to fit screen or something like that. I'm missing Schedule A. Does anybody else have Schedule A? Not Appendix A, but Schedule A. I have Schedule B, but I don't have Schedule A. Schedule A is description of the project funding and deposit requirements.
I don't have that.
I want to note also that my requesting information regarding maintenance costs and how we would handle this, how we would take on maintaining another park goes back 2 years now. And these questions, these documents are, it have been 6-7 months in the making. I guess one of the things I'm curious about is if this goes out to bid after we pass this, first you got to execute the contract, you got to get the controllers sign off on it before you actually send things out to bid. What work is actually going to be done in the fall?
So, council member, just to your point about the maintenance, what we shared back at the end of 2019 when Ryan did his original presentation, and the follow-up was that we didn't have the answer to that question because we didn't have the terms of the proposed terms of the maintenance and operation agreement. Now we have the proposed terms of the maintenance and operations agreement, which is why we have DGS here this evening to talk about the we believe minimal amount of additional maintenance this is going to be putting on DGS's plate. So obviously we've wanted to answer that question for months, and that's why we've been going back and forth with New York State DOT, because at the end of the day, I know we agree with the council. There are concerns about taking responsibility of too much, and that's why we've been pretty deliberate in our negotiations with the state. So, and we would touch on that in the presentation this evening. I just, I'm trying to get a sense for where the council as a whole is at. The other thing to note with these agreements is that most of the language in the agreement is form language that DOT requires in their contracts. Most of it we can't change. So just know that. I know it's, 56 pages of a maintenance and operations agreement, however long the betterment agreement is. But most of the substance.
However long the Schedule A is that we don't have.
I don't know where you're referring to the Schedule A though. I'm trying to find that as we speak.
Yeah, well, if you look at the betterment agreement.
If I can jump in for 1 second, I sent everything I had when I sent out the support legislation to Michelle and Danielle and JR, but it doesn't seem that Schedule A was in there. So, you are correct, council member, that it doesn't seem to be attached.
David, the reason why I'm asking is it's specifically referenced on page 2 of the betterment agreement. And as I was sorting through my documents, trying to get a little organized for this discussion, I realized that I didn't have that.
Well, and I think
so I just realized it now. Otherwise, I would have asked. But this is, part of the problem. I appreciate what you're saying. My point is, I've been waiting for the answer to this question for 2 years, minimally for 7 months now. We've had no updates regarding this, and now we're being asked to pass this within 8 days of not even having all the, without even having the complete agreements for this. So I've been waiting for 7 months, and this is a problem that we have been talking to the administration about through most of my tenure, where we're getting incomplete information or information at the last minute, and basically the administration is saying, you need to jump, you need to trust us on something, and we have a due diligence requirement.
I understand what you're saying. Again, we didn't have the finalized agreement until Friday morning. We've been negotiating with New York State for a long period of time. I share your frustration. This has taken way too long, but it's because of our advocacy in terms of ensuring that we're not taking on more responsibility and more liability than we believe the city can handle. So that's why we are where we are today, because we've been pretty tirelessly negotiating with the other parties involved. But
just to jump on to what David's saying, up until a week ago, you know, we were responsible for the maintenance of this entire structure, substructure, and the top part as well. So it was impossible to give you the costs of our maintenance portion when we didn't know what that maintenance portion was going to be. And many of you have worked with the state. Councilmember Doche, I know you have intimately as well. And they very much are, we're ready, we need this now. After months and months and months of us pushing them on this. And I know that sounds like I'm blaming someone else, but it honestly, you've worked with the state before. They were literally said, we need to get this posted on for RFP this week. We had to go back to FHWA and get them to approve of the posting before your action, which they did on a very tentative basis. So the whole thing is kind of tentative, very carefully balanced at this point. So, you know, just to give you, that's just the honest background, is that up until a week ago, we were responsible for this entire structure.
And I am familiar with the state, and I'm also familiar with sometimes when people are asking appropriate questions, it's a really good thing to take a moment to look at things and make sure it's right. And you usually wind up with a better product in that process. And that's not to say that, you know, our thorough review is going to result in some sort of, you know, changes to this agreement. I did mention to David yesterday something that I saw. I thought it was in the betterment agreement. I've gone back and tried to find it, where we have an obligation to pay the balance of the bill, an absolute obligation to pay the balance of the bill if the project has cost overruns. And these days where construction materials are have been going through the roof, doubling in some cases in the last 6 months, I would have a concern about us agreeing to something like that, especially while I'm sitting in the mayor's office and she's telling me why the city cannot take care of Woodlawn Park, cannot address the weeds in Woodlawn Park. And, you know, I don't know why we can't take care of Woodlawn Park if we think we can take care of this park.
I just have something to say really quick. I mean, we have gone over this several times. This Skyway project is, I believe, in is Councilwoman Love's district. Councilwoman Love is a big supporter of this project. And I just feel like, you know, individuals in upper wards or just chiming in talking about, you know, they want more details and they want this and they want that. Like, you know, maybe we should hear from the council person who represents that district. They have said it several times that they support this project. We have issues that we need to discuss that need to be addressed. That is more pressing than this issue that we have been going over for 2 years now. And quite frankly, I am frustrated. I just want to let's move on. You know, the councilwoman who represents that district supports this project. Let's support this and let's move forward.
Councilmember Anani, we're here to do our job. You have reminded us many times. If we've got a problem with how long a meeting goes, we're doing our job. We have an obligation to do our job. And there are potential very significant fiscal impacts on this. And while we are dealing with a shortfall in the budget, $17 million shortfall in the budget this year, we're talking, we shouldn't be writing a blank check.
Well, Councilwoman, I just think that when you start making comparison as it relates to your park versus some other parks in the lower wards, I find it very offensive where Woodlawn Park is not being taken care of. So,
okay, so let's stop. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to go. Well, okay, we're not going to go back and forth with this. This is something that could take time to Mr. Gallen's point about if moving ahead with the presentation or not. If members are comfortable moving ahead with this, can I get a show of hands? If you're comfortable moving ahead with it, forward with it. If not, we'll the cursory review is only I think there are more hands down than up. So, okay, Mr. Valorant, myself, Mr. Nani,
I counted 6, Kelly.
you did.
1, 2,
Okay.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's like 9. What do you?
I only saw.
No,
Well, I'm not
only
counting
members,
I'm not counting the
only
virtual
count-
hands.
Only count the members. So, okay, with that, there's
My
6, you
hand
said.
is up to speak, not up to.
Right, okay,
vote.
so
My
keep it
hand
down.
is up to
So
speak.
there's 6, and there are a few others out there that either are undecided or aren't comfortable with moving forward with it. So we'll just refer it to planning and work it through that way. We'll take the time we need to review this stuff. What I would say is Michelle and Kathy, can you work to get us into that meeting? Can we schedule a meeting? Excuse me.
Did you say planning or finance?
I meant finance. I meant finance.
Oh.
Finance. I'm sorry. I'm looking at Kathy. She's in the middle of my screen. So finance, can we pull together a finance meeting to discuss this and do what we need to do to move forward with it, but in a timely manner that's comfortable with the members.
We have a couple of meetings scheduled. I'm thinking the 24th, Michelle. Does that make more sense to you?
Councilmember Farrell.
That's already jam-packed. I am
I thought
thinking the
23rd
23rd.
more.
The 23rd would be a lighter, because we only have the 5-year capital plan for that day.
For the 24th.
No, 24th is the legislations and something else, but the 23rd is a 5-year capital plan.
All right, I had them reversed in my head, but
Yeah,
whoever
so
wanted-
Can we take that vote again? Because I don't know. We counted 7, and there's like 10 people. So I don't know if that's not the majority.
But it only takes one, to be honest. If you want to MC it,
Yeah, we
get
need
unanimous
unanimous
consent.
consent.
Gotcha.
So,
Right.
you know,
it can go on the 23rd or the 24th.
I'll reach out to you, David, and
That's okay.
Before we move forward, then, I mean, Councilmember Farrell, if I may, so the next meeting of the whole body is September 10th. The meeting after that, I believe, is September 21st, and then there won't be another meeting until October 5th.
correct.
Is there any way to do the finance, to hold a finance committee meeting on this before the 21st, so that it could, I mean, in the usual, with some ordinances, we can introduce, go to committee and have it acted on, not the following meeting, but the meeting after, which in this situation would be September 21st. Is there any way to put this on an agenda for the finance committee before the 21st, so the council could potentially take action on the 21st?
I don't believe so. Mainly because I'm not going to be in town. So I'm going to be out of town a big chunk of the week of the 14th.
Okay, I want to stress again, we're looking at losing the entire construction season if we push this past.
You guys, if somebody wants to do it for me, then that's welcome to happen. But
I'll hold the finance.
And we can work on that offline. Okay, so we're postponing to have a planning meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson and then Mr. Hoey. Mr. Gallen, what, you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say we'll circle back with leadership after offline.
Okay, all right. So Mr. Johnson and then Mr. Hoey.
I just wanted to echo what Judy said. At a time when we're bringing concerns to the administration, and we're being told that due to COVID and due to other things, we can't get the services that we need right now, I think is a little insensitive and to come and see this forceful push. The last time we heard from the mayor, she was talking about big cuts. And, I don't understand, how we don't think about moving forward. We do have a responsibility, and I think the responsibility is to think rationally. If we're going through a period where we're going to have a major reduction of workforce, why would we be even considering adding another responsibility to a workforce that's stretched out already? So, you know, that's the first point that I want to make. And I just think that people should be allowed to express how they feel about any project, because that's what we're here for, to voice our concerns and what we think. You know, I don't agree with people's opinions often, but I still think people should be allowed to express how they feel, because that's what this is all about, us coming and working through stuff. And it's going to be hard to work through stuff if people can't express how they feel, or people feel rushed when they start talking. So I think that the timing of this whole conversation is a little insensitive when, you know, as a whole city, people have sat there and watched their parks not get any of the treatment that we're used to getting. So the timing it makes me uncomfortable to even want to hear this conversation due to the fact that we had to look at our parks in a manner that we did this summer. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Hoey?
Yeah,
And then Fahey.
what I would like in my big request is, I want to know what the cost of like replacing the concrete deck would be, what the cost of keeping the drains clear. I don't understand as far as the superstructure, who paints that, you know, the steel, that steel needs to be painted every 5 years, I believe. I'd like to know what the costs are so we can make a good informed decision. Because when we were told this originally, and when I voted for the bond, it was the state was going to take care of all the costs. I didn't realize that there was still negotiations going on. So I just want to make sure that we know what we're getting into when we get into this. And one of the things I did email it out, and David kindly responded, is my concern is that if we don't keep up with the maintenance, the state says we own the bridge, and it's over a major highway. And you know, Jeff DeStefano is a bridge builder in the area. I'm good friends with him. It's very expensive doing any type of bridge work. So I just want to make sure we know everything we're getting into before we get into it. So David, if there's any way you can get us estimates, I mean, I'm not going to go down to the dollar, but just a rough estimate, you know, how much a deck would cost if we have to redo the deck, you know, and the maintenance stuff also, and painting and stuff like that. Thank you.
I do understand the concerns about the costs and maintenance, absolutely. And but I do want members to really think long and hard about this project. This project, you have to look forward. This is a potential revenue producer. You'll see spin-off projects and development from this project, and we cannot lose sight of that. I know people are extremely frustrated with the state of things this year, but I think this is a project that we have to be looking forward. And this is a project that has a very strong potential to make a difference, to bring in new revenue to the city. And we need that. We're going to need that to address some of the cuts that we're facing and so on. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conti and then Mr. Robinson.
No, I was just suggesting a possibility of a special meeting on our caucus night on September 30th, if that would help in terms of enabling us to consider it sooner. But, you know, we've already, you know, that's all.
Good idea.
I think that's a good idea, Richard.
That's a good idea.
Can we do a straw poll for supporting that?
I think that, could we just try to maybe see if we might try to get together a finance committee meeting? So if that doesn't work, I think we still have time to figure that out, but perhaps we can look at schedules and try to figure out a finance committee meeting before the 23rd.
Thank you.
I don't care how and when we do a more detailed review. Just the idea of us taking a first look at it today and having a vote on it next Thursday without even having all the documents currently in our possession that are part of this agreement is not appropriate. But, you know, whether it's at caucus or a finance committee meeting, I don't personally care.
Can I just ask, Did you guys always have this level of detail at all the borrowing we did for the Uptown Parks improvements and the sidewalk improvements? And, you know, the standard is growing higher and higher, and I don't really.
Marissa,
Yes.
the city investment in this is, our share is $1.4 million, which is essentially the equivalent of all of the capital projects that the mayor has done to date for all of the other 16 or 17 or 18 parks. So those are like 1/18 of the amount of money that we are being asked to invest in this. This is also different in terms of it is a raised structure, it is a bridge, and bridges have a lot more potential maintenance issues in it.
Right. That's why we negotiated so
and
strongly to not take on that structural maintenance repairs.
Well,
I'm
Kelly,
sorry?
listen,
But again,
Kelly, we got
can-
hands up, and I don't know if you're going to be calling because I have had my hands up for a while now.
Yeah.
Hold on. But you also always jump in.
Okay.
So just settle down for a minute. Mr. Robinson's got his hand up. I apologize. I can't see virtual hands. I can only see actual hands. I don't. So, but Mr. Robinson, are you there?
Yes, I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Councilman Johnson and also Councilwoman Duche. This is a last minute thing that I didn't even have time to didn't have time at all to digest. And also I just want to let Jenny Farrell know, as a member of the Finance Committee, I do have limited availability for the rest of the month of September. So whatever we decide to do, if we can decide it within a short amount of time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, and again, I'll get you, Mr. Nani. This isn't leadership, pushing this forward. The administration asked to speak on this, and they wanted to move this forward, and we afforded them the opportunity to do this. So, with that being said, Mr. Anani, go ahead.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I just want to share my sentiment as relates to this project. This is an equity kind of project that we're talking about. Again, there's $10 million that the state is given in these times that we're in. $10 million to go towards a project in the city of Albany. And we are dragging our feet on a game-changing project that Kathy said could bring revenue into the city, could be spread off to restaurants and businesses. We need big, bold ideas for this city to be sovereign, for this city to move forward. And there are several municipalities that would twist their arm, break their arm to make sure to get $10 million from the state. I want to be clear, we are going through some tough times right now. And whatever federal dollar or state dollar that we're going to receive, we better act upon it. We should not lose this project because some people want to go over not being able to see the weeds from the trees. Let's work on this project so we could get the $10 million.
Okay.
Right now, wait, I'm not finished. There's not that many municipalities that are going to receive $10 million moving forward in these challenging times that we're in. So what are we saying no to? And there are individuals who are making comparisons to a park in Woodlawn and not making a comparison to a park in Lower Arbor Hill. I find that very frustrating that we're talking about a park that is going to be Lower Arbor Hill, and individuals are saying, well, I didn't get a park in I'm not getting improvements in my ward, in the upper ward, so I don't think that we should take on this major infrastructure project. What kind of message are we sending to those kids that live in those neighborhoods? That wait, let's take care of Woodlawn first before we could start entertaining the $10 million project in Lower Arbor Hill?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anani. Now I actually see virtual hands. Thank you, Zoom gods. I believe it's Mr. Ballard and then Mr. O'Brien.
I'm just gonna say, I think we've already made a decision on this.
So,
I think we have a lot of pressing issues we need to address. To put it in this type of a structure, to be able to pass it, the MC, you need unanimous consent. So
We're past the point.
at that. So I think, we should, take, we made a decision. Let's move on. Let's take the time. Let's read the documentations. Let's make sure we're very versed on it, and let's have this discussion. And let's move forward. But I think we have some other serious issues that are on the agenda that I'd like to start discussing, since we've already made a decision on this. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Anani, please. Mr.
But
O'Brien.
we've already made a decision that we don't have the votes to move it.
Right, we're moving on. It's gonna, we have a finance meeting or some other type of meeting that we will have that we can discuss these very issues. Aside from the fact that all along, we have been discussing these issues with regard to this. Mr. O'Brien, and then we're moving on to give.
Okay, just very briefly, because I know we are going to take it up within the Finance Committee. But a couple of comments. Kathy had mentioned economic development. Nobody has really given us any expectation of what that economic development would be. It's actually, it's a recreational development, yes, and that in itself is important, but that doesn't necessarily generate economic development. And the other point is, which Russo made, is why, kind of like the state's giving us a gift. Well, compared to other cities within this state, the state gave them urban parks that are state parks. So the municipality didn't have to put itself out for millions of dollars and potentially an unknown number of dollars. So there are states, there are cities in this state as well as other states where old infrastructure, old state highway infrastructure has been transformed into urban parks and remain as state parks. So I don't look at it as an ungrateful city asking too many questions. I think they're legitimate. And obviously, when the city entertains a cost of several $1 million, it impacts the entire city. It even impacts, the parks in the other parts of the inner city. So, and that's my only point. And the rest of the questions can be raised at the proper committee meetings. Thank you.
Just to be clear, the financial projections are part of the public record. They were shared with you during the DRI process and during the TAP application. So I encourage everyone to go take a look at those before the next committee meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we'll be moving on to the Albany Police Department and their staff. We have, I believe there's some JAG information that's coming to us also along with the GIVE stuff. So take it away, Chief Donahue and company.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, actually, I should say. I'm joined with, I have Commander Foley here. Katie Clark is also here. She'll be presenting the GIVE grant to everybody. Also have Leah Golby that is on standby for my phone a friend in case I need any additional information. So starting with the JAG grant, the Justice Assistance Grant. Like I mentioned, Leah Golby she's our grants project coordinator. He works collaboratively with our fiscal team, which is led by Bridget Pardo, and they partner with various subject matter experts in the police department, and they look for these grants and apply for these grants, and we get these grants. So the JAG grant is a grant that we use to supplement. A good way to describe it is it supplements our GIVE strategy and our violent crime strategy. So we use the GIVE grant to operationally for static patrols and also some other patrols in areas where we see an increased crime, whether it's in Pine Hills for increased robberies, or it's in West Hill or Arbor Hill for increased violent crime, whether it's shootings, robberies, whatever we're dealing with in that situation or that area. The grant is very helpful in that regard. So it gives us resources for overtime, so we can put officers in those areas. It gives the command officers and the stations the ability to have that flexibility. They can put out those details in those areas. And again, all those details are driven by data. So if the data says that we're seeing data and also street intelligence from the officers. So we see increased robberies in an area, we can deploy officers quickly in that area to suppress that. So the grant is very helpful in that regard. It also helps us with obtaining resources like equipment. For example, in the 2020 grant, we're planning on purchasing, also in the 2019 grant, we're purchasing shields for officers on patrol. So in the event that there is an active shooter or some other type of situation where a shield will be necessary, it gives the patrol officers that ability to have that extra protection to keep them safe. So the grant is very helpful in that regard. So it's a good way to plug in holes and allow us that flexibility with staff, as well as gives us the ability to purchase other equipment. And also there's a small portion of it there that is used for crime reporting to the FBI for the UCR data. So that's the JAG grant, a summary of the JAG grant. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those and then move on to the GIVE grant that Katie Clark will be presenting. Okay, so Katie Clark is going to be logging on here. She's going to be presenting the GIVE. For those of you who don't know Katie, Katie's a MSW. She's our anti-violence coordinator. She has a very important role of organizing the GIVE program and all the reporting requirements that it requires. She also does many other administrative functions with the GIVE grant. She's been involved with the GIVE since the start, and she plays a very important role in keeping the grant moving forward and making sure we're in compliance with our reporting requirements. She also does a lot of these presentations. So with that being said, with a little introduction there, I'm going to turn over to Katie. It's got to turn my mic off here.
Hold on, working on some sound.
I've seen this happen before. One of you may have to turn the volume down on your device. I don't know if even though he muted his mic, his volume may still be up.
You're still muted.
I see it, thanks. I think we've got our sound issue resolved. Thank you guys for setting this up for us. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to use to guide us through this that has a lot of the data in it. So I'm going to try to share that now. And give me just a second. Okay, I think this is working now. So we are going to talk about the Gun Violence Elimination Grant. We are on GIVE 7 right now. So this is an annual grant from DCJS. New York State, after conducting an in-depth analysis of crime data in New York State in 2013, found that while most of crime had significantly decreased since 2004, shooting homicides were still up 6%. And so they turned what was their Operation Impact grant into the Gun and Ball Violence Elimination Grant. And that became a priority to use evidence-based strategies to reduce shootings and aggravated assaults in 17 jurisdictions statewide. So the first awards started in July of 2014, and now our 7th year of funding will start it on July 1st. And our funding cycles are not by a calendar year. They go from July 1st to June 30th of the next year. These are awarded to 17 counties in New York State outside of New York City. And each jurisdiction partners with, at minimum, the district attorney's office and probation for their award and the creation and development of all of their strategies. So when we look at Albany this is what our numbers look like for the last couple years. They're full calendar years for 2014 through 2019, and then everything that we've had through August 31st of this calendar year, so 2020 year to date. So shots fired incidents and shooting incidents are times when a gun is fired and an injury or death occurs, and the numbers have tended to be consistent from year to year, but this year clearly we've seen a very, very large spike in those numbers. Unfounded shots fired are incidents which can be conclusively determined that no shots were fired. Those may be fireworks, cars backfiring, or other things that people who call those in may have heard instead. And then unconfirmed shots fired are incidents for which we cannot conclusively determine that shots were or were not fired. When we're looking at our shooting victims historically, we see that, you know, this month clearly we tend to see that most of our people are shot in the month of July. This year that spike moved backwards to June. 2020 saw a very steady increase that started pretty abruptly in May and has only decreased within this last month. This is earlier than we typically see. And we're up 132% when we compare our number to a full 5-year average, but when we compare where we are right now to January to August, we're up just over 256%. So to date, we've had 101 people shot, and that's compared to 29 people last year and 41 people in 2018. The chart on the bottom shows this year's numbers compared to last year's numbers, as well as the 5-year average, which is the dotted line in blue, and then the 5-year high, so that is the highest number of people shot in each month for the last 5 years, and then the 5-year low, so that's the least number of people shot in each month for the last 5 years. So those lines were pretty steady before this year, and this year is definitely an anomaly. People struck is up 70% across the state when compared to 2019. And we look at shooting incidents involving injury, New York State is up 64% compared to 2019. So while we're seeing a very dramatic increase, we also know that statewide similar increases are being seen in each of the 17 GIV jurisdictions. Shots fired is also very similar. In 2020, so this year to date through August 31st, we've had 186 incidents of confirmed shots fired. So that includes people who have been shot, as well as when shots were fired and, you know, bullets may have hit houses or cars, or we found evidence on the street of casings if there wasn't property damage. Again, that's up very dramatically, just over 215% when we compare it to the 5-year average. And this also follows a very similar line where we tend to see the spikes start somewhere in May. Again, this year, that spike really went up in June and then has just started to decrease now for the month of August. When we talk about our GIV strategies, in developing the plans, each jurisdiction has to use more than one of each of the evidence-based strategies below. So the options that we are provided with by DCJS are hotspot policing, focused deterrence, crime prevention through environmental design, and then any agent or any jurisdiction that has a street outreach program must work with that street outreach program. So that is one of our required evidence-based strategies that we use. And we've been happily doing that before that was a requirement from DCJS. As we plan our strategies, we have to analyze our gun violence data, and that includes the geographic location of where shots fired and shootings are occurring, the time of the shooting, which includes the hour, the day, and the month, and motivating factors. This helps determine the nature of the violence we're experiencing so that the appropriate strategies can be selected to combat the violence that we're seeing. The first evidence-based strategy that I'll go over is hotspot policing. So this focuses on small geographic areas where crime is concentrated. This is setting significant clusters of crime that generate a large portion of the total crime reported in the broader community. It's also considered part of the strategy where we look at where hot people or the people that tend to commit violence the most are congregating. So either they're hanging out there, or they reside in that area, or there's other activities in that area that draw them there. Our crime is identified both by our community calls for service as well as our patrol calls for service. The difference between those are when the community calls us and reports an incident happening versus the patrol officer who is in the area is the first to be there and essentially reports the crime him or herself. When we look at our shots fired hotspots going back to 2014, sorry that I didn't update this to include 2020 as a heading, but it does include a 2020 map. We see that our shots fired hotspots really have not changed that much over time. There's going to be a quick graphic that just shows how this changes and where the hotspots move to. And I know when I did this last year, we wanted to see this a couple times. So if that is something that you would like me to take a pause and do, just let me know. So we have 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. So as you can see, our main hotspot is in the area of Arbor Hill and West Hill and tends to move a little bit east and west, and then our area in the south end also tends to grow. It is not our most concentrated area of shootings, but it is a very significant place. We tend to consider that we have two hotspots, one being in the Arbor Hill West Hill area, and then one being in the south end. As we're looking at considering where our hotspots are, we also go, I see a question from Councilman O'Ryan, I think. Okay, I'll keep going. So as we're considering where our hotspots are, we not only look at where our shootings are, but we also conduct what's called a conflict analysis. So we understand that much of our gun violence is rooted in disputes and conflicts, and that there are activities that occur that can lead to those disputes and conflicts. So in order to anticipate where that might occur so that resources can be deployed appropriately to attempt to prevent that gun violence, we examine calls for service for narcotics activity, persons with a weapon, group annoying, fights, gambling, and dice games. And again, those are based on community complaints as well as patrol officer calls, but we tend to rely more on the community complaints to drive where that conflict analysis shows us where those hotspots may start to emerge. When we recognize there is a hotspot, we work to determine how to address what's going on. So we do that based on information from the Capital Region Crime Analysis Center, and we try to determine what resources are available in that area. So are there businesses that are there? Are there community members that are there? Are there nonprofit organizations that are there? What kinds of things are going on in that area that may help us determine what's happening? We engage both business owners and residents, and we deploy additional officers if needed, assuring that they're aware of the problem in the area and the different options they have in addressing that. We also engage with SNUG to make sure that they are aware of the issues that we're seeing and any spikes that we're seeing and where gun violence is occurring. And they conduct outreach in that area to address any of the issues that they're seeing. One of the newer strategies that we're using this year in addressing our hotspots is, as we determine where those hotspots are, we're focusing on both macro and micro hotspot locations. So those micro locations may be specific addresses, which may be a resident's house, it may be a business, it may just be a specific corner. Where gun violence is happening or where we see conflict analysis spots occurring. And so when we deploy patrols to that area, we're giving them a larger geographical area to patrol, but also asking them to stop and specifically interact with the people that are at those specific addresses or corners so that they can get a better understanding of what's going on, interact with the groups that are there, interact with the residents that are there, interact with the business owners that are there, so that there's a relationship built, but also that the specific activities are getting addressed. When we talk about hot people, one of the things that we've been using since 2012 and something that's also required by the state as we receive GIVE funds is called the Violent Offender Identification Directive. So in conjunction with the Crime Analysis Center, we created a risk assessment tool that is almost completely data driven to identify individuals who were in the most imminent danger of being shot or shooting someone. So research was conducted on the past 4 years of shootings, and they looked at both the suspects and the victims of those shootings. So the histories prior to those shooting incidents revealed many commonalities. There were previous weapons charges, the individuals were present on the scene of other shootings, they were the victims and the perpetrators of previous assaults, they were involved in gangs or groups, and they tended to have disorderly conduct arrests. Analysts identified over 100 different data points and applied a weighted scale and a subsequently qualified risk. So this tool aggregates the weighted scores across the data points and produces a risk-based hierarchy that is their overall risk as well as the 90-day risk. So we can look at people who are overall trending towards being someone who's in a position that may be a likely shooter or be shot, but also look at people who are in a little more imminent danger. So people who have been at countless shots fired within the last 90 days versus shots fired incidents within the last year, say. And that helps us identify people to do outreach to. Once those individuals are identified, there's a deconfliction process that occurs. Our enhanced supervision unit officers make outreach to those identified individuals and try to work with them to understand the most effective way to redirect them, whether they're in some kind of altercation with somebody, if there are stressors that are occurring, if there is a need for employment, kind of what's going on that's putting them in a position where we're seeing them at shootings, where we're seeing them engaged in fights, where we're seeing them with prior weapons charges. And they make outreach to those individuals to attempt to direct them to services, support, and outreach. And then for us, redirection is achieved in a variety of ways, including employment, mental health services, substance abuse services, and educational opportunities, essentially whatever those individuals are identifying as their needs. And then when an arrest must be made, the district attorney's office is made aware of all background information and the outreach made to that individual so that they can understand the things that have been attempted before we had to move towards arrest. The second strategy that we employ is called focused deterrence. This is a mix of law enforcement, social service, and community mobilization, where we directly engage with a small number of known chronic offenders who are often group or gang members and are responsible for committing the majority of the gun violence. Back when we started with GIVE, we have been working with the National Network for Safe Communities, which is now out of John Jay College, to create the group violence intervention strategy. And as we did that, we again looked at all of our shootings and homicides over the last 5 years, and then homicides going back to 2009, to understand what the associations were for those that were involved in the violence, whether they were victims or whether they were offenders. And what we found was that there was a very small number of people, about 0.5% of the population of Albany, that were responsible for about 75% of the gun violence that was occurring. So we knew that if we were able to communicate clear incentives to those individuals of what was happening to them or likely to happen to them if they continue to engage in the activities that they were, as well as the consequences for engaging in that activity, that we would be able to make a focused way to have those individuals redirected. Sometimes the strategy is called pulling levers, because the other aspect of what we do is engage with those individuals and some of their spheres of support, including family members, coaches, peers, so that they also understand what's going on, can understand some of the legal risks that these individuals are facing, and sometimes just understand that these are individuals that are seen on social media carrying guns, that they're seen at shots fired scenes, so that they can do what they can to keep them safe, and also have a conversation with them about kind of where their life is going. This provides direct access to social services, supports, and other needs as well. So pulling levers refers to the desire to pull every lever available, whether that's formal or informal, in order to deter continued participation in gun violence. It's family and community pressure, it's group accountability, and then it's using supervision, prosecution, and police working cooperatively to make sure that when an incident does occur, that we're making an arrest and having that case prosecuted successfully. We know that those that perpetuate the violence are typically involved in a group. We are pretty consciously using the word group instead of the word gang, because one of the things that we know is that our gangs, Uptown, Downtown, The Yard, previously the Jungle Junkies, OGK, and Ride a Set, tend to be much more loosely hierarchical than the federal definition of a gang. We don't see people in charge. We don't see master plans happening. We see small groups of individuals that pledge allegiance in some way to Uptown or Downtown or The Yard, and tend to hang out in smaller groups together and sometimes commit crimes together. And so there doesn't tend to be a sense of organization or structure found in what we consider gangs, which is why we often use the word groups. That's something that's been guided to us by both DCJS and the national network as we've been engaging in these strategies. One of the questions that had come up when we participated in the emergency public safety meeting last week, I believe, was the question of what our victims look like. So this is both the race and the age ranges for our victims from 2014 through year to date. So what you can see is that the majority of our shooting victims are young Black males. Of the 358 victims that we've had, 333 or 93% are male, 7% are female. And per year, this ranges from about 3 to about 10%. When you look at the age ranges, what we see is that the average age for a shooting victim this year is 25. Historically, it's been between 28 and 30. So in 2019, the average age was 28, and that's the same for 2018, 2016, and 2014. 2017, the average age was 30, and in 2015, the average age was 27. So as you can see from the chart on the bottom that shows the age ranges, part of why the average age dropped so significantly this year to 25 is that we've had 14 individuals between the ages of 13 and 17 injured by gunfire this year. I will say that for 2019, there was one individual under the age of 13 that was shot. And for 2020, there are 3 individuals under the age of 13 that were shot. And that includes a 7-year-old and 2 10-year-olds. And then in 2019, there was also a 3-year-old. I'm sorry. As we look at our shooting victims, we also know that 87% of our shooting victims have a history of having some kind of police contact, and most of the time that includes arrest. 20% were on some kind of supervision, so they were on probation, parole, or federal probation when they were shot, and 23% had been present at a prior shots fired call. In the last 5 years, we've seen a 67% clearance rate for solving our gun homicides and being able to make an arrest. Our perpetrators for our gun homicides tend to mostly be Black males, but during this time period, 2 Black females were also arrested for gun homicides. You can see that for this year, 2020, we have had 9 gun homicides. 3 of those cases have resulted in arrest, and 6 of them have are still open. For last year, 1 case was closed by arrest and 2 others are open. And then for 2018, 8 cases were closed by arrest and 2 are still open. There are some cases where multiple arrests were made for a single incident. And so that is where you may be seeing some of the numbers being a little skewed for the age ranges as opposed to a 1-for-1 for the homicide case statuses. Our non-fatal shootings account for the majority of our gun violence occurs. Victims tend to be historically uncooperative, which means that arrests are harder to make. So one of the options that we have is to treat our non-fatal shootings like a homicide, and that we don't have a victim who's going to be able to tell us what happened or who was present when they were shot. So many of the closed by arrests that occurred are due to the investigative efforts that have occurred from our detectives as they've been looking through these cases. To date, We've made 70 gun arrests in addition to the arrests that have been made for our non-fatal shooting cases, and we've recovered 72 guns. This is about even with 2019. The average age of a defendant for a non-fatal shooting case is 25, which is close to what we're seeing for our non-fatal shooting victims as well. 32 incidents have had arrests made for them this calendar year, and that is 35 individuals arrested. 10 of those incidents are for non-fatal shootings. 3 of those are the homicide incidents. When we look at individuals that have been arrested with handguns, the average age of those arrested is 25 again. But additionally, we have about 20% of the 70 people that were arrested who are under the age of 18. So those are juveniles, they're individuals that can be handled through the family court system. And so I thought that that was significant to share. A large part of the strategy of the focused deterrence strategy is group violence intervention. This is an evidence-based strategy from the National Network for Safe Communities at John Jay College. And it is a partnership between the city, the Albany Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, probation, the U.S. Attorney's Office, parole, and our support and outreach provider, which is through Trinity Alliance, as well as a number of other nonprofit organizations and SNUG who are present to directly connect those that attend the call-ins, which I'll talk about in a minute, to services and supports. This allows police and prosecutors to increase the certainty, swiftness, and severity of punishment by directly engaging with known offenders who are often group members. They communicate clear incentives for compliance and consequences for criminal activity, and it also provides a framework for support and outreach services. So the 2 key components for the group, for the GVI strategy are custom notifications and a call-in. These are face-to-face meetings between group members and representatives from the GVI partnership. In both, the messages are from law enforcement, which the law enforcement message is that any future gun violence will be met with clear, predictable, and certain consequences. And group members' acts of gun violence will trigger enforcement actions against the individuals as well as their associates for any current criminal activity that they're engaging in. There is a moral message from the community, which involves representatives, including a mother who's lost her child to gun violence, somebody who has a street reputation of having been involved in gun violence prior, has served time and has now come back to their community and can speak from a perspective of lived experience, and respected community members who know many of the individuals who are in attendance. There is also an offer of help from social services for anybody that wants it, with a one phone number that is directly to that person that they can call at any time to engage and reach out for services. To date, we've held 6 call-ins with 113 individual participants. Those 6 call-ins have occurred since 2015. We were planning to hold our 7th call-in in April of this year, but unfortunately had to cancel those plans due to COVID. We've conducted more than 300 custom notifications, and custom notifications are when we send an officer support and outreach services together to an individual who's involved in gun violence. It tends to be associates of victims or suspects or people that we know are engaging in an ongoing conflict, to try and talk to them about not retaliating, not engaging in that conflict, and trying to find another resolution to what's going on. It's also an immediate offer of support and outreach from our support and outreach provider, and they give them their phone number and they follow up so that they can get immediate services if they need them. And those services are available to the individual, their family, or any of their friends. We know that providing support and outreach to group members is critical, and it's an important aspect of our GVI process. A one-point person with one phone number allows for easier navigation of access to help. Being a social worker, I know how hard it is to navigate through the various systems and sometimes just get an appointment with a provider for just about anything, let alone fill out some of the applications that are required. And so having somebody guide you through that process is extremely helpful and beneficial. Our referrals for that person come from a variety of sources. Mainly it's the Albany Police Department's Enhanced Supervision Unit and the Albany County Probation's GIVE probation officer. but that person's phone number is also given to everybody that attends a call-in and everybody that receives a custom notification, with the offer that they can give that number to anybody that needs it. And so we know that that individual also receives phone calls often from friends of people who have received that business card. We also conduct offender notification forums. These have been occurring since July of 2012, so that's prior to GIVE being in effect. And this is a partnership between the police department, the district attorney's office, the U.S. attorney's office, the Department of Corrections, so parole, the Albany County Reentry Task Force, and Trinity Alliance. We replicated the Project Safe Neighborhoods Offender Notification Forum. This was developed by Tracy Mears from Yale University and also sometimes called a Mears Forum. The focus of the forums is to give fair warning of both local and federal consequences of additional participation in gun violence and provide alternatives for those who are involved in gun violence. The parolees that attend these notifications are people who are known to have violent felony convictions on their record, and so that puts them at unique risks if they continue to engage in gun violence. And so it offers them a quick legal education as to the things that they may face so that they're informed as they're returning home. And again, they have an immediate offer of support. They hear messages from people who have been in their shoes and can provide them guidance based on lived experience and support from the community at large. To date, there have been 49 forums that have engaged 506 different participants. New to last year, we started with the Non-Fatal Shooting Project. Because, as I said earlier, non-fatal shootings account for the majority of gun violence that occurs in Albany, and the cases are harder to solve, we recognized that we needed additional resources in order to be able to gain the evidence that was needed to solve those cases. And by taking this different approach and treating non-fatal shootings very similar to homicides, we saw that jurisdictions like Newburgh and Utica were able to make an increase in the number of arrests they had made. And this allows us to take gun violence offenders off the street. The last strategy that we engage in, and that I definitely want to highlight, is street outreach. We've been working with SNUG since 2012. SNUG treats gun violence like a disease by identifying its cause and interrupting its transmission. They treat it like a public health crisis. They engage with high-risk individuals who engage in gun violence. They address issues that prompt those individuals to use a gun, and they aim to change community norms and attitudes that can accept gun violence as a part of life. They respond to shootings in order to prevent retaliation, and they help detect conflicts and work to resolve them peacefully before they lead to additional violence. Part of what the police department does is notify SNUG of any non-fatal shooting that occurs so that they can respond appropriately depending on what the situation is. We meet monthly to discuss any trends and locations, and we provide referrals for high-risk individuals who would benefit from outreach. These tend to be individuals who are returning home from prison so that they have a familiar face who can welcome them back to the community and help them navigate the difficult transition it is to be back home and engage them in supports and services immediately. New to the SNUG program recently has been a social work component that includes case management and counseling. This includes trauma and mental health follow-up because we recognize that those that are victims of gun violence and around gun violence are at a high risk of being traumatized and are going to think differently and need different needs. So by having people that are specially trained to be able to address that, they're able to work through difficult issues with those individuals. This also includes the urban grief services provided by Lisa Good and her team, which is also broadening out into the community to address the trauma and stress that the community is seeing as gun violence is perpetuated in neighborhoods and not only to people individually. So we know that residents are just as affected by gun violence as victims themselves. And with that, I didn't want to take up too much of your time, so I will open it up to any questions that you may have and figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Look, I think Mr. O'Brien, you had a question early on. You're done? Okay, so Ms. Frederick. you're up. And then Ms. Fahey.
Thank you. So I'll try to be brief. Just a couple of questions and some comments. So first, you had a table up where it showed 13 to 17-year-olds, and you acknowledge that there's kids that are of lower age also within those populations. I'm just curious, how many of those under legal age youth are actually innocent bystanders compared to kids who are involved in whatever activities being taken place? Do you know that?
You mean in the 13 to 17 age group?
Yeah.
For this year, I would say that it's more than half are not innocent bystanders. I very consciously took out the 3-year-old, the 7-year-old, and the 2 10-year-olds because they were innocent bystanders, and that was something that we recognized. But I would have to get back to you with specific numbers. I know off the top of my head, it is more than half.
Okay. And then, okay. The next question, and this will be my last one because I know there's probably a lot of questions from everyone on the line. The first slide, I noticed when the program started, we saw a decrease in the number of gun violence related metrics that you had presented. But then I noticed a trend continuing on after the first year of increases to shots fired, victims, etc. So that leads me to question, just because numbers don't lie, the effectiveness of some of the strategies that are in place with this program. And I'm curious to see if the other counties, I believe you said 17 or so, also received this funding, if they saw a similar pattern or if they saw improvements and continual decreases. And I'll say outside of this year, because I know this year is a little different.
I'm not fully aware of what's happened in the other 17 jurisdictions. I know that is data that's available from DCJS. Anecdotally, I know that for 2018 through 2019, we have seen gun violence continue to trend back upwards. I don't remember if that happened back in 2017. I do know that 2016 for us was an anomaly year in that it was one of our lowest years to date.
Okay, thank you.
Fahey, Hoey, and then Robinson.
Katie, thank you very much. This is, all very interesting information, and I can see how much work has gone into this. Sonia mentioned the 13 to 17-year-olds. I can't help but think, you talk about whether they're innocent bystanders or not. When you're around a person who is violent and becomes part of your life, even if you're not involved in it, it's easy to progress towards a more violent lifestyle. And I can't help but think these 25-year-olds who are the shooters and the victims, we miss them at some point in school. The connections weren't there. They never had that career that they could go on to. It's a really huge missing piece. And I guess I'm wondering, this is a great program, but is there discussion of what's needed earlier on to prevent gun violence, especially with those innocent bystanders you talk about, because they're, like I said, they're the next violent offenders later on.
And I think that's always the discussion. I think that's a discussion that comes up very often when we talk about gun violence, and kind of how people end up on either end of a gun, either pulling a trigger or as a victim. I think that there are a number of questions about what the circumstances are that lead to that, whether, it's education needs, whether it's recreation needs, whether it's additional family support, whether there are signs early on that people can step in, whether that's formal services or community members that are assisting children and families. And I think that that's just something we don't have a good answer for. When we work with DCJS, they focus very much on looking at what the data is telling us. And it's very recently that we've started seeing this trend of having, let's call them, they're school-age kids, juveniles that are both perpetrators and victims. And so we're at a point that we have to figure out what to do about that. So
Thank you. And the other question I had was, when you say we are looking at this, we are coming up with, we use these strategies, who are you talking about?
I think it's a number of different people. It's the police department, it's the district attorney's office, it's probation, it's SNUG, it's the school district, it's community organizations.
So do you meet together regularly to coordinate these efforts?
Yes. Yes. The Partners for Give meet at least weekly. With COVID, that's changed a little bit. But we also meet monthly to go over strategies, and we create the Give strategy together. The district attorney's office, probation, and the police department have to submit a joint strategy each year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the other thing I just wanted to mention, you know, this year, of course, has been so terrible, and so many Albany residents are so incredibly upset with the number of shootings and the number of victims this year. And it's this kind of information that you're giving would be really helpful to get out more broadly, just so people know how much work is going into addressing this violence.
Absolutely. And I think for me, the fact that this is able to be recorded and available on Zoom is kind of a blessing, because it does allow for that. You know, and I think the conversations that have been occurring recently around gun violence and what really makes up our gun violence this year, because it is such an acute crisis, has allowed us to be able to do that really effectively.
Thank you, Katie.
Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, Katie, thank you so much. You've given us a lot of information tonight. One of the things I really appreciate is when you talk about group as opposed to gang. And one of the things I want to comment on is, you know, we had school was gone virtual this year. My son is in the public school system here in Albany. And now kids are home. I mean, he was only online 3 or 4 hours a day, and the rest of the time he could do whatever he wanted. So, and I'm really concerned that school is going to be virtual for this next semester, you know, in Albany. And we're going to have a lot of kids out there, you know, whether they go to do the virtual work or not, they're going to have a lot of spare time. Now, I'm a former young male, and young males have the tendency to want to fight. I mean, who's tougher than who? And my feeling, and again, I don't know, but I just know being, you know, growing up in an urban area, you gotta have sports or some other outlet. You know, I'm thinking like boxing. My son does karate. We gotta get something, especially for our younger kids who are getting, we had about, you know, the number has increased of the young 13 to 17-year-olds. So we really need to get some kind of social stuff going so that we don't go beyond. And I do have a question is, you know, we talk about, well, there was so many homicides, but when a person gets shot, and especially a young person, I read one person got shot in the knee. You know, what type of damage does this do long-term to the person's body? And do these kids realize the damage that they're doing to each other? You know, I don't know if it's because of video games where you can shoot and kill, and then you just start another game and it's a do-over. But in real life, with a real gun, it's not a do-over. I mean, if you're hurt or damaged or killed, you just don't reboot and start over. So, I mean, I appreciate the numbers. I guess I don't have any questions, but thank you for explaining the groups, and, you know, hopefully we can come up with something to keep our kids busy and try to get them away from this type of violence. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and Mr. Conti, actually, no, that's Mr. Johnson's hand up next to his. Mr. Johnson, and then Mr. O'Shea.
I
So
think it's,
thank you.
Yeah, hold, back up for 1 minute.
I'll defer to Mr. Johnson first.
Okay.
Well, thank you,
But Mr. Johnson,
Councilman.
please.
Thank you, Councilman. I just want to say I've spent 3 years advocating for youth programming, complaining about my concerns about parks and recreation, and all of these things factor into some of the things that we're dealing with. You know, Albany, as a youngster, I had alternatives of where I wanted to go to after school. And, you know, I had choices about activities to do on the weekend. And today, when we look at what our kids have, we don't have, our kids don't have those choices. So, and another thing is, you know, when you start to find out who these kids sometimes that are perpetrating these acts, they aren't the typical street kid all the time. They're not a kid who had a whole bunch of problems. You know, a lot of stuff is just poor choices and poor split-second decisions. You know, the lack of things to do sometimes put people in situations that they don't need to be in, and they end up regretting being in. So as long as we continue to ignore the pleas that come from the needs of our community, these type of things are going to be happening. And, you know, we're going to be forced to rely off of groups like SNUG and whatever effort that is out there trying to counteract what's going on. So we need to take a real look at what the city is offering on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. Our kids want to do better, they want to be better, and they don't have the opportunities that we once had. So some of the solutions are right in front of us, but we just not taking a hard look at them. Thank you.
So, Mr. Robinson, your hand was up for a while, and then Mr. O'Shea. Okay.
Thank you. Katie, so you mentioned before that the hotspotting is an evidence-based strategy. What type of evidence is that strategy supposed to, what type of outcomes are supposed to be come from that particular strategy? Is it you show that there's a mitigation in crime? Is it that you show that there are more arrests being made, more guns taken off the street? But what are some of the evidence-based approaches?
Councilman Robinson, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. You're cutting out.
Yeah, Mr. Robinson, your audio is cutting in and out.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hear me now? Good. Okay, yeah. So you mentioned evidence-based strategies. So my question is, what is the evidence supposed to show? Is it supposed to show that there is a reduction in violent crime? Is it supposed to show that there's more guns being taken off the street? Is it supposed to show that there are more arrests being made? What is the evidence supposed to show by the hotspotting technology?
Mr. Robinson, you're having a similar issue.
If he types his message in the chat, we can read it for him.
Okay, I'll type it in the chat.
While Councilmember Robinson is typing, do you want to move on to another question, or do you want us to wait?
While he's typing, Mr. O'Shea can speak while we're getting his question.
Thank you. Lots of great information, disturbing information. The numbers are really pretty stark in the charts that you provided. I simply wanted to ask you if you would email your PowerPoint presentation to Michelle so she can distribute it to the entire Common Council and have it available in our files.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And while Mr. Robinson's getting his question together, to Mr. Johnson's point about opportunities and recreation, as a part of that group, when you were mentioning you mentioned a couple of different folks. Are Parks and Rec and other city departments a part of that group that are coming together to try to, make some plans for reducing this violence?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that that's a conversation that comes up pretty regularly about the need for community centers and recreational opportunities and things like that, but not any formal conversations, regarding gun violence, no.
Okay, well, we're still waiting. Mr. Ballerin?
Thank you, Councilman Kelly. I guess I've got just a couple of quick questions. Can you go over who your partners are? Maybe I missed it, but can you just go over quickly who the different partners are that are around the table that you say you guys meet every week? Yeah, so who's around the table weekly?
So the formal partners for the GIVE grant are the District Attorney's Office, the Albany Police Department, and probation. When I talk about who we meet with weekly, that also includes federal probation and parole. Monthly, the Reentry Task Force and Albany County Mental Health, as well as some other outlying jurisdictions, Troy and Schenectady namely, and the state police. We have federal partners. I'm trying to think of who our community partners are. I have separate meetings with Trinity Alliance and SNUG, information sharing with Lisa Good for her things, and then I know that we have meetings with the school district as well.
Now, when you, I guess my question, for me, a big part of this is I always look at the entities that have resources, who has, the dollars to actually make some of these changes. And some of the big players that I always think should be around the table, as consistency as possible, is the City of Albany, the Park and Recs, is the school district, and is APD. I mean, those are some of the big resources. Those are the entities that have the dollars behind them. And I know I'm not taking away from any of the other partners. I'm just saying we were focusing on how we can address the issues with the younger population. Those are the entities that have the resources that, when you meet with the school district, is it monthly, you said, or is it weekly?
I'm gonna let the deputy chief answer this. He's sitting in the room with me. Give me just a second so that we won't create an audio issue for you.
Also, I just wanted to share that I have Councilmember Robinson on the line. So when this question is answered that was posed by Councilmember Ballerin, I'll restate his question if that's okay with you.
Yes, please.
Okay. Councilman Ballerin, I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing your question, and could you just hit on it again? I apologize.
So I always feel some of the bigger players, the organizations that have the most resources, should be, sitting around the table as much as possible. And to me, some of the biggest players are APD, school district, and the city. Those are the ones that have some of the more resources. So my question was, how often are those three entities meeting? And I agree, the DA should be a part of those meetings as well. They have resources, and I think it's great that we meet with, Albany County Mental Health. But how often are those entities meeting together, not just having separate meetings. Because sometimes when you have separate meetings, you don't, you're creating silos instead of trying to close the gaps.
That's correct. Yeah, so as it relates to GIVE, we have these meetings as Katie described. And some of these meetings are law enforcement specific, and then we break off into some of the other services that these different agencies can provide. So as far as the school district goes, there is units in our department, NEU, for example, ESU, TRAC, they communicate with them on a regular basis. And those officers are directly involved in this whole strategy. So that way it's preventing that silo effect. So we have those meetings with all law enforcement officials and executives from the different agencies, and then the strategy is put together, and then it goes from there to where it needs to go. So if it's school related, so if we have an issue with somebody that goes to Albany High, for example, so they're involved in some type of incident, we have constant communication with Handle with Care and other different things that we do with the school district on a regular basis. So they may not be directly involved in some of these initiatives directly, but there is a line of communication with these agencies. Same thing with mental health and all the other agencies that you're describing, that you're discussing.
Okay. I did have another question, but I'll allow Councilman Robinson to ask his question. I think he's been very patient in that.
Thank you. This question is asked on behalf of Councilman Robinson. And he would, Councilman Robinson.
Yes. So with the hot spotting strategy, it's supposed to be evidence-based.
With the hot spotting strategy, it's supposed to be evidence-based.
What type of evidence shows that the strategy is working? Is it the number of...
What type of evidence show that the strategies are working? Is it the number of guns taken off the street?
The number of people arrested?
The number of people arrested?
Or the number of violent crimes mitigated?
Or the number of violent crimes mitigated?
So these strategies, we go where we're being either called to or where the crimes are occurring. So we see in a lot of these strategies, we see that it doesn't move around too much. As you saw on that graphic that Katie showed in the presentation, you saw those hot spots kind of move. They didn't really move too much. They just slightly moved. So as far as seeing if the strategies work, I mean, we're aware, we go where these incidents are occurring, we're making arrests, and we're having a visible presence there. And we are seeing through the data, we've had some years where we've had definitely, you could see some success. But as far as violent crime, there's so many factors that go into violent crime and whether or not it's going up or down. I wouldn't pin it just on this one strategy. There's a number of strategies that we use. We have to adjust them on a regular basis. So, I mean, ultimately, we would love there to be zero crime, but we realistically, I don't know if we can ever really achieve that. So we do our best. And I think this strategy gives us the resources to put in these communities and these areas to combat that. So success rate, I mean, we're taking guns off the street, we're making arrests. This year is obviously, there's a lot of other factors, but if you look at previous years, we've had some years where we've had no homicides. So, and violent crime and gun crime particularly has been down. So, I think the strategy, if you look at the long term, it's successful in many ways because we've developed other partnerships and other programming as a result of this. So I think we stay with the strategy and we're always open to other suggestions, like I said last week. So we're always looking for new strategies, new things to implement to add to this. But I personally feel that if we didn't do this strategy, that the numbers would be much higher.
All right, Councilman Robinson has a follow-up question. I believe you guys can hear him when I do it like this.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, again, we're talking about evidence. So what is the data that shows that this particular strategy or the multitude of strategies are working? Because as you show the heat map, it just shows that the violence is contained in one area, which is predominantly West Hill and Arbor Hill. So if we keep seeing violence trends increase in those neighborhoods, how are we deeming that this program is successful?
So again, I mean, like we spoke about last week or, the last meeting, this isn't just a police department specific issue. There's so many issues that go into crime and violent crime and the issues with crime and various neighborhoods. So like I said, I think if we didn't use this strategy, the numbers would be much higher. We'd have a lot more problems. So the evidence, I would say, is that we're able to keep a handle on it. We're able to make arrests. And oftentimes I give you many examples where, our response times are better, and we're preventing violent crime with some of these resources that we have. And it gives us the ability to have extra resources. If we didn't have these programs in place, we may not have the resources to have the outreach that we do, to have the extra patrols, to have detectives working these cases as they do. Every shooting case we work as a homicide case. So yeah, it is evidence-based. The evidence-based portion of it is we go where the crime is happening. The crime is happening in these neighborhoods, so that's how we focus our resources. So decreasing the crime in these neighborhoods, that's a problem that involves, or that's a solution that involves everybody on this call, as well as everybody else in the community, because there's so many pieces, like you guys said, community, sports, community events and centers, and so many different things. So that, I think it's unfair to say that just because crime isn't all the way down, there's no evidence to show that this isn't working. I would submit that if this wasn't in place, violent crime would be a lot higher. So it's hard to really show, give you a graph to show that the effectiveness there.
Councilman Robinson, go ahead.
Okay, we can talk about that more later because I actually disagree with your assessment of that. I believe that the approach is more reactionary than it is more preventative. So the next question I have with the whole hotspot strategy and a lot of overtime going to, there's being a lot of overtime. I have an issue with community members, myself, other council members saying we know where the areas are where violent crime occurs in our district. And we've asked for static patrols to be on the corners. And we're always told that we don't have the resources. But yet we're saying that there's overtime being allocated to prevent a lot of the crime. What is your assessment of that?
My assessment of that is, like we spoke of last week, is that static patrols, a patrol officer sitting on the corner, is not effective. So we're going to a strategy of having officers out of the car walking. There's, like I said, it's a multifaceted approach. So there is resources out there. There has been officers out there visibly patrolling, walking. They're not just sitting in a car, because if they sit in a car at one corner, guess where the group is going? The next block over. When they're static and moving around, they're visible, and it's more effective. And we have a lot of research, a lot of examples that we can give you of that. So community members are saying, yeah, we want more police out there, 100%. And there has been more police out there. We've been making a lot of patrol-initiated gun arrests, several over the past week. Since we spoke a week ago and we said how we were shifting our strategy slightly from the static patrols to the more mobile patrols, we have seen several guns taken off the street, and in fact, shootings prevented even as recently as a couple days ago. So it's been effective. They're out there. They're 100% visible and out there. So, I don't know. That's my assessment of that, is that the officers are out there. These resources are allowing us to do that, and they've been effective in taking guns off the street and making arrests.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute it in enough time, but Councilman Robinson mentioned that you could move on to the next. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I just, a follow-up question, just to Councilman Robinson's point that he was making? Like, how hard would it be to change from First Street below Lexington to a one-way going up? I was on that block yesterday, and I'm just watching cars just go flying by, And, you know, like that, and that's coming from the community. And, you know, that also can prevent someone who does something dangerous from being able to just get to that highway so fast. So, like, I think that's something that we could do just like that, because it's community generated, and it would send, you know, because they have had some gun arrests, but from what was shared, that it was community input. So the community is trying to work with you, and, you know, what a better way to show that we're listening to what they're saying. They're saying that, you know, they think that a one-way right there would be a big deterrent.
Yeah, Councilman, I don't disagree with you there. However, when you change roadways, that's not in my wheelhouse, but I know I could talk to Bill Trudell, but I know there's a lot that goes into that. I think there's traffic studies and different things that go into that. I don't know if anybody else has more experience in this call with that, but that's definitely something we could look at and get the wheels in motion on that. And along with that, I know Chief Hawkins is, you know, our staffing is, as everybody knows, is a little low right now, but he's trying to rebuild the traffic safety division. So we could, part of the strategy would be also to have some more traffic enforcement out there as well to help out with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Ballerin, did you want to get back in there?
Thank you. And I just got one more question. When we looked at one of the slides, and I'm not sure if you can go back to that slide, that looked at the years, I think 2012 to 2020, the crime rate, homicides and shootings. The homicide shootings, it was one of the first 4 slides. It looked from 2012 to 2020. What I saw, and well, if you could put it back, if you could share it again, that'd be great, because maybe I saw the numbers, maybe I missed the numbers, or maybe I didn't see them correctly. But what I see is that the last 3 years have been some of the toughest. You know, if we're looking at where we were before to where we are now, I'm looking at some years, you know, where we have confirmed shootings have been up since 2018. You know, we've had more homicide, you know, victims, including homicide. If you look, you know, we've had more in the last 3 years than we've had before. You know, my neighbors are scared. And to piggyback on what Councilman Robinson said, you know, my neighbors say they want to see more of a police presence. They want to make sure, they want to feel safe when they go outside their streets. And, you know, it's 2020 is a year like no other, and we can see that by the numbers, but we could also see that the last 3 years have been tough compared to the years before that. So I guess my question is, what data you found that gives us some kind of an explanation of why, you know, there's been such an uptick in gun violence, in gun activity, maybe I shouldn't use the word, in gun activity, you know, in these last 3 years. I mean, this is, you know, we can see it. I mean, so my numbers weren't that crazy. You can see, you know, victims of, you know, is up, you know, since 2018, what, 55, 52, and 100. You know, before that, you know, 2017 was 45, and then it was in the 30s. You know, same thing with shooting incidents, 40, 45, 48, 76. Before that, it's in the 30s. So, you know, the last 4 years, we've had confirmed shootings in the 90s. So I guess that's my question. What data or what evidence do you have? What information do you have that says what's happened these last 3 years that has brought it so that we have more gun activity than we've had in the past? And
Yeah.
I do appreciate you sharing this with us, because, you know, this is so much easier to go through than the quarterly reports. So I'm glad we're gonna get this PowerPoint.
Yeah, I mean, and these are trends that they've seen. I'm gonna turn over to Commander Foley. He does a lot of he's been in the ICU or the CRAC for years, but I mean, these are trends that we've seen. This isn't just specific to Albany. So getting back to my point about crime, like, we don't know exactly all the factors that make crime increase and decrease, but I'm going to turn this over to Commander Foley to kind of go through this a little bit more with you to kind of explain this.
Good evening. There's not a whole set answer I can give you, but I can kind of fill in a lot of blanks for you. Back in the early 2010, 11, 12, 13, a lot of proactivity work done here in the city of Albany. We put a lot of offenders in jail for various crimes and various different things. They are now starting to come back out on parole, getting out of jail, federal probation, whatever it may be. So we're seeing a lot of our old violent offenders coming out. What we're seeing, especially this year, even though again this year is an anomaly, we're seeing a lot of old disputes that guys had before they went in or before they went away, coming to the surface. Also, I believe starting in 17, we started to see this little rivalry between Troy and Albany, and it's really nothing more than just a social media rap video type thing where they each call each other out, they diss each other on social media, they look at each other the wrong way, and then now we have a shooting over there, immediately retaliation over here, our guys go back right over there. So we see this we had not seen that in any years prior. And once that gets rolling, it's kind of hard to stop. Well, we work closely with Troy and Schenectady now for that matter as well. When this is going on to put a halt to it. The other thing we are seeing is this year we did see a real uptick in the between the uptown and downtown guys. We don't know what kicked it off, but it's been violent. It's been we believe in the past couple of months, about a month or 2 months, we've arrested some of the more violent individuals responsible for that. And I'm going to say it. I think that's why you see the decline in the shots fired and the shootings over the past 11, 12 days. We made some serious or major arrests in some cases. Some people are incarcerated. What we're finding is there's only 1 or 2, 3, maybe 4 really, really violent kids in each group. It's just a matter of getting a handle on those kids and taking them into custody or, solving the problem. And once we can have them in custody, we reduce the problem. Going back to 2018, we did have we had real violent month. I believe it was July and August. We were good up into the July and August. Elijah Cancer is shot and killed down in the South End. That sparks off some retaliation back and forth. That's probably sparked off 15 or 20 shots fired. And I can't tell you how many actually shooting victims off of one thing. So it only takes one spark to set off the powder keg. We work hard to get it under control. As I said, now hopefully I don't put my foot in my mouth a little bit later on this week. But I think we've got a good handle on what's going on right now, and we'll be making some more progress in the very near future.
Yeah, I'd just like to know one more thing to that too. And the cases have gone up dramatically, and the progress that these detectives under Commander Foley's leadership has been tremendous. So I just want to give some accolades to them as well for all those efforts to be able to handle all these cases and make that progress that they've been making.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief and Ms. Clark and Commander Foley. Any more questions? Okay, if no one has any further questions or comments, I move you, Mr. O'Brien, you got a question? No? Okay. If we don't have anything further, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Hold up. I do want to know, can we have a conversation about returning to the chambers?
Oh, yes, that's right. You did want to bring that up. So for the APD folks, if you guys want to bow out and take off, this is our stuff, so you guys don't have to stay for this. But just the
Thank,
discussion.
thank you to everybody for allowing us to come here and talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you very much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you.
So yeah, Mr. Johnson requested a number of times over the last few weeks, probably longer than that, about getting back into the chambers. And I said we should bring it up in the caucus and speak amongst ourselves. I've actually spent a little time with Danielle, seeing what she was trying to do with the chamber in terms of social distancing and making this stuff work. It's really difficult to do. So, Mr. Johnson, if you want to speak, you can. And then Ms. Gillespie, I'll have you comment and give us your thoughts on the chambers and the possibility of returning.
Well, I think that we should take the approach that the school district has taken, and have it where people that don't wish to be in person have that option. But right now, with things being the way they are, a lot of budget cuts, a lot of serious hardcore decisions, I think that it's important that we are in the room and be able to have conversations. A lot of conversations are prevented from us being on video. So, we have to present some normalcy to our community, and, City Hall is open for the community to do business. I don't understand why it's not open for us to do the local government business as well in the chamber. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, so and what I'll do is, Ms. Gillespie, can you just run through?
So there is nothing that would prohibit you. I don't know if you can hear me okay. That would prohibit you from coming back in the building. The building is fully open. We have made some modifications to the spacing of the member's desk. I do have masks available for each member coming in. I also have sanitizing wipes to clean. The problem is managing a bifurcated meeting without the appropriate technology. Now we made some progress with looking at equipment for the chambers, but then we had a setback when no vendor bid on that particular project. So we still will be trying to conduct a bifurcated meeting with some on location and some participating remotely with legacy equipment, and that could potentially be difficult. And then cause people to question transparency, or people to feel that maybe they wanted to speak on a certain point and our workarounds were not as effective. So the building is open. You can come in. I mean, if leadership and the council makes a determination that they want to resume in-person meetings, that's fine. But we would have to do it with the contact tracing in mind. So everyone that was physically there, your name, your address, we'd have to screen you, take temperatures before you came in, which would mean that people would have to get there early enough so that they could be screened and have their temperatures checked before they participate in the meeting. So those are just some things that we've been trying to take into consideration in anticipation of physically meeting again, if that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah, I've got a question. My understanding is that you're going to be able to put the equipment thing out to bid by allowing the bidder to modify some of the equipment. So maybe within a couple of months, we might have much more up-to-date equipment, which could handle a bifurcated meeting. And then the other issue is, even if you got the council members' desks 6 feet apart, and I'm trying to imagine how that would look, the people attending, the public wouldn't, I mean, we wouldn't be able to hold more than, I don't know, 10 members of the public.
Six. It's six.
Six.
Yeah.
6 members of the public.
And it'd be first come, first serve. So it's the same thing with the physical maximum occupancy. If you're in it, you're able to participate in the meeting, but if you're past the 6, you wouldn't be able to participate physically in the meeting. However, if we stream it, you could still participate online, and we would encourage, and you may have to revisit your rules of procedure, like we would encourage people to submit comments in writing, knowing that there was such a limited occupancy for the general public to physically come in, because you can only fit 6 people in there. We measured it out, and for the general public to sit 6 feet from the members, the chairs kind of form like a zigzag. And then also to accommodate for the media, because the media has the right to participate, but they'd have to participate on the other side of that bar to ensure that they remain 6 feet from the members and the general public as well.
So would the new bidding, the revised proposal for bidding, that will allow us to put in bifurcated equipment such that we could have a meeting in the chamber and the public could participate, either 6 of them by coming to the chamber or by remoting into our meeting?
So the way I read the last update was one of the suggestions where we look at the items that were recommended by the committee, the PEG Access Board committee that was looking at updating the chamber equipment, and we try and go through the individual contracts that the city has with, say, like B&H Products, and we try and find items that meet the need of the council. But that would involve us going through, looking at particular items, and then seeing if they were compatible. It may, I don't know what the appropriate determination is. We can go through and review and try and identify some items that would meet the need of the council, or ideally you would have one vendor, do the purchase and install everything, because they'll troubleshoot, they'll make sure that there are no incompatibility with the technology that's being purchased. And I didn't think anyone had made a final determination, because the way I read that email, they pushed it back to the council to get direction to see which way the council wanted to proceed. If you wanted to order items individually, or if you wanted to go out to bid again. And then when you go out to bid again, there's a whole process. The bid has to be published.
Well, my feelings were to take your recommendations on it, which means not conforming to the specifications that were originally set, but being flexible, maybe going to a bidder that the city is more accustomed to dealing with, and maybe having to customize the equipment for this bifurcation of some by remote, some by in person. Those are my feelings, and I don't know if we have to meet to make that decision, but that's what I would recommend.
I'll reach out to Mr. Simpson, who played an integral role in all of this.
Yeah.
And then we'll go back to the table and see if we're able to, based on the contracts that we currently have in place, identify some other equipment.
Okay. But I think what I'm hearing is maybe we can't go back into the chamber until we make those modifications to the equipment.
I mean, I'm not making that determination. I just wanted to make it, make everyone aware of what we could potentially experience if you do decide to do a bifurcated meeting and people were trying to participate physically in person, and then we were trying to have others use Zoom and participate from their houses. I just wanted to put it out there. Ultimately, it's the council's decision as to whether or not you make the determination to return. We are constantly looking at that room and trying to identify ways to keep everyone safe, because maintaining safety and health is my primary priority. So I've reached out to other municipalities to find out what they're currently doing. And as I identify practices that would improve our ability to maintain safe and healthy, I try and bring that to the attention of leadership.
Right, and the health and safety of the members is of the utmost importance. And again, I think that would mean that we probably have to do the bifurcated meeting in order to allow some members that might be vulnerable to participate. Judy and then Tom.
Thank you, Kelly. I do appreciate how hard Danielle has been trying to problem solve this, and was in the chamber and saw at least one configuration of the desks, and would have some concerns, especially if any of the council members would take off a mask in the process of public speaking. And I think that that's possible, that some people might opt to do that, in which case the 6 foot distance is generally not considered to be sufficient when somebody is speaking loudly, kind of thing. So one of the things I was wondering, since the county legislature has about double the number of members, I was wondering if using their chambers might be a possibility that we should explore if we want to return. And I don't know what their videotaping, et cetera, experience is. I think in that situation, we'd be looking for all members to feel, to know and feel comfortable with that particular option, and agree that we're then going to meet all in person at that particular point in time. So that was just one thought that I had.
And I believe we were looking at the 55 Eagle Street. The name is escaping me right now. The Capitol Convention Center.
Yeah.
And I went on a physical tour of some of their meeting rooms, and their meeting rooms are relatively large. But my one consideration would be, how are we going to adequately get a recording? Are we going to have a videographer come in and follow the Common Council around so that you can memorialize the meeting? Are we going to go back to audio recordings? Because I don't know from their system infrastructure what they would make available to us, if they would let us use their recording system, or if we'd have to bring our own recording. To account for members that are speaking, you could in the chambers identify a space, and they could be handed a wireless mic, and then that way you don't have to worry about spittle or sputum possibly hitting towards other people. There is a space that we could allocate kind of sort of in front of the dais that would allow them to speak and maintain 6 feet of distance from the people at the dais and the other members on the floor at the time of the meeting.
There also is likely to be a significant cost associated with that if we're doing meetings every 2 weeks, I think.
And during fiscal constraints, we may not budgetarily be able to pull it off unless they gift us the space and they gift us access to a videographer or allow us to use their equipment.
Thank you. Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I was just wondering, could we bring in our iPads or our iPhone and, sit at our desk and just Zoom? Why do, we're doing this now. Couldn't we do something like that? And maybe even figure out who would want to come in and maybe take turns where, one meeting, this group comes in, next meeting, another group comes in. So I think you were 2 questions, but I'm wondering, could we do, bring our iPad or our iPhone in and just Zoom from our desk and have that personal thing, and we'd be all watching at the same time?
We've never attempted during a meeting to have every council member with a device on the city's network. So I don't know if there could potentially be connectivity issues. And then if you have turns coming in, how would you manage presenters? Because there's times when people will come in and want to present during the Common Council meeting. So there's just some logistic things.
There's the sound issue too that we really experienced tonight.
With having multiple devices, and that
in the same space.
Okay.
Councilmember Farrell pointed out would be a huge issue.
Headphones.
Right. I would say just that after this conversation, it doesn't look like we're quite there yet, but we can continue to explore. Maybe Jenny, we can get together with Danielle and try to come up. there's really no configuration. I have a lot of the pictures from where Danielle had stuff laid out. I can send them to members so they could see them, but it's just, it's a small space to begin with. The airflow is terrible. It's just not conducive sound-wise for a lot of the things we want to do. We can try, and of course, maybe have a further conversation with Danielle about trying to make it happen, but it's going to be difficult.
The other thing that I just want to bring to everyone's attention is if you're wearing masks in that room and the air conditioner is on, in the actual recording, we typically turn the air conditioner off during the meeting because the sound quality is so poor in there. So you would potentially have stifling air, heat, and a mask on. I mean, you may be able to meet in person again once you head into a cooler season, but right now it's hot. And the chambers is extremely hot.
I think the other piece is perhaps maybe council meetings, we wouldn't be able to figure it all out, but maybe even, because DJ's point is that it is completely different to talk face to face than it is over Zoom, I think. And that's a good point. Maybe it's something where we can start looking at maybe a caucus meeting or something like that that can be broadcast, where that's less of an issue for public comment. We can just ask people to watch or send in public comments, but something where we can, I mean, maybe we can look at doing other meetings person to person so that we actually can do those face-to-face conversations and build from there.
So I just would like to add, it's people coming into City Hall and they're meeting, and the 6 feet. I just think that we're bringing up all of the negatives. There's a lot of negatives that we deal with when we meet on video. People, not everyone that wants to get their questions in, get their questions in. I think that we have to really take a serious look. The school districts are opening. People are moving forward, and it's like to say we can't do this because of X number of reasons, but we are making decisions that aren't having full discussions in this capacity, and I just think that we really need to take a hard look at reconsidering entering back, because all of the things that we're talking about, workers are experiencing that every day in City Hall. And so, like, it would be a difference if we were hearing that people are getting sick. We're hearing that, anytime somebody comes in there, if they find out that they have COVID, everybody that come in contact with them is going to have to go through the tracer process anyway. So, like, some of the things that we're saying as why we can't come back are things that people have to deal with every day. This is a part of our new life, the new world. So I just think that it's important that we have a chance to meet, have a normal meeting again. These meetings they aren't normal. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So with that, unless someone has something else, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second again.
Okay, all those in favor? Bye.
Aye.
Goodbye. Aye, aye. Thank you, everyone. Be safe, and talk to you soon.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
And if people see